I think my wife thought I might have answered too quickly, but that's my first reaction. Without apology or explanation, I miss CBS. I've missed it since the day I left there. I had a good run. I know that. Dan Rather is 93 years old and still working every single day. But what most people don't know is the dark secret that's haunted him for 60 years. In 1963, he made one mistake on live television that sparked decades of conspiracy theories. The government buried the truth, Rather tried to fix. But it was too late. Then came the mysterious attack in 1986. Two men in suits followed him home and beat him while asking the same strange question over and over. For years nobody believed his story. Today we're revealing what really happened to the man who fooled America. Dan Rather was born on Halloween in 1931 in a tiny rented shack in Wharton, Texas. The house had no phone and no plumbing. Even though the town's water tower was nearby, his family still had to carry water in buckets and use an outdoor toilet no matter how hot or cold it was. His parents barely made $20 a week. During the Great Depression, they had to move 2 times before Dan was even 5, chasing pipeline jobs that paid only 15 cents an hour. At night he would lie awake counting train whistles and promising himself that one day he would escape poverty. His father, Daniel Sr., dug ditches for 10 hours a day, laying oil pipelines for Humble Oil. He'd come home tired, covered in red clay. But instead of resting, he'd asked Dan about the news headlines. He read old newspapers during lunch breaks and wanted his son to do more than just study. He wanted him to think. During the war, when money got even tighter, Dan's mother worked double shifts as a short-order cook and a seamstress. Once, she sewed 200 military uniforms in 1 week for just 7 cents each. Their effort left a deep impression. Dan learned early on that work wasn't just about money. It was about who you were. That belief stayed with him. Years later, his co-workers at CBS gave him a nickname, Iron Butt. He often worked 18-hour editing days without complaining. He said that kind of drive came from remembering how his parents pushed through their own long days. When he was 19, Dan hitchhiked nearly 160 kilometers to enroll at Sam Houston State Teachers College. He had a $300 scholarship, enough to pay for books, but not food. To make ends meet, he washed dishes in the cafeteria at Sunrise, called high school football games at night for $3 a game, and wrote stories for the campus newspaper at 70 cents an hour. Before turning 20, he had already written 100 articles. One of them even led the school library to stay open longer on Sundays to help veterans studying under the GI Bill. Those articles caught the eye of the Associated Press office in Houston. They hired him part-time, letting him report courthouse verdicts between classes. He learned how to think fast and write even faster, skills that would later save lives on live television. Still in college, he landed a graveyard shift at the Associated Press in 1950. He worked 6 days a week for $28. It wasn't enough to pay for the bus, so sometimes he slept on a cot beside the ticker machine. One night he rewrote a 200-word story about a refinery blast, only to have it rejected over a misplaced comma. Rather rewrote the whole thing in 7 minutes. That impressed his boss, who gave him double the work. From then on, at the AP, he learned that his writing had to be as sharp as it was short, tight enough to fit on a wire, strong enough to stick with readers. It was also at the AP that he began reading dispatches from Edward R. Murrow. For the first time, he imagined a life beyond small-town Texas, maybe even on television. Every morning before school, Dan's father had one word for him: steady. He'd repeat it as he tightened rusty pipes. That word stuck with Dan. He scribbled it at the top of every notebook and whispered it to himself. before every live broadcast. On September 14, 2001, just days after 9/11, he ended the CBS Evening News with "Courage and steady." That short message brought in more than 10,000 emails within a day. In 2020, he used that same word as the name for his newsletter. In its first year, 300,000 people subscribed. That single word had traveled from a Texas pipeline to millions of phones and screens around the world. On September 9, 1961, Hurricane Carla was tearing through the Gulf. Dan Rather was just 29 and working for COTV in Houston. Instead of fleeing the coast, he made his way into the Galveston Weather Bureau. The wind outside was screaming at 145 miles per hour. Rather convinced the meteorologists to let a camera roll while he stepped out onto the catwalk, a space everyone else had already abandoned. Winds were still over 100 miles per hour, but Rather stood there in a flapping trench coat and shouted over the storm, warning people they had only hours left to evacuate. That 45 second clip aired across the country. It triggered the largest coastal evacuation in U.S. history at the time. Over 500,000 people left before the hurricane hit. Thanks to that warning, only 46 people died compared to over 400 who died in a weaker storm just 4 years earlier. That wasn't all. In New York, CBS executives saw the same clip and noticed something new. Rather had placed a transparent outline of Texas over the radar image, showing just how massive the storm really was. Carla's eye was 50 m wide. The storm itself stretched across 400 miles, almost the entire Gulf of Mexico. No one had ever shown something like that on TV before. Even meteorologists were stunned. Rather's coverage earned him 2 major journalism awards, the Ohio State Award and the Columbia DuPont citation. And just like that hurricane, Dan was born. Only 3 weeks later, CBS called. On April 16, 1962, at the age of 31, Rather joined the network as a correspondent. His salary quadrupled overnight. He was sent to Dallas to run the brand new Southwest Bureau, covering everything from the space program to tornadoes. Just weeks in, he was already anchoring national specials. Ratings jumped 18%. That made it clear Rather wasn't going back to local news. He was staying on the national stage, but before he could even settle in, CBS sent him straight to Georgia. The civil rights movement was heating up and Rather was needed on the front lines. Between late 1962 and mid-1963, he filed more than 80 stories from towns like Birmingham, Jackson, and Oxford. He dodged bricks and tear gas. He reported live after Medgar Evers was murdered. In Alabama, he sent footage of the governor's schoolhouse standoff just 17 minutes after it happened. That beat every other network by hours. White supremacists slashed his tires. They ran his van off the road. Once they left it, note saying he should leave or die. He didn't. CBS kept the cameras rolling and the legal team kept bail money ready. Rather was arrested or detained 6 times in 9 months. No other TV journalist went through that much in that little time. Dan Rather didn't wake up that morning thinking he'd become part of history. It was Friday, November 22, 1963, and he was just 32 years old, working as CBS's bureau chief in Texas. That afternoon, something happened that would change not only his life but the way America watched the news. CBS had heard whispers that someone had captured the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on film. Rather was sent to check it out. That's how he found himself sitting in a dark conference room, the blinds pulled shut, with a Bell and Howell film reel spinning quietly beside him.